There is a preacher story which is surely made up, but hits a nerve, and so it's been told and retold and reprinted and retweeted. I wish it were true, but there's no evidence for it. Still makes for a good story, though. There's a Texas bar adding to its growth, adding to its building because they were doing so well, and a nearby church decided to pray to God to stop it. At some point, before the building was finished and they were able to open it, a bolt of lightning struck the bar, burned it down, and the church folks were bragging on God that he'd stopped the bar from continuing, so the bar owner sued the church for being responsible for damages. In court, the lawyers for the bar owner were laying the cause on the Christians, while the lawyers for the church were denying responsibility, and the judge listened to it all, said, I don't know how I'm going to decide this, but it appears that what we have here is a bar owner who believes in the power of prayer and an entire church that does not. Grishel tells a version of that story in his book, A Christian Atheist. He challenges those who believe in God but act as if he doesn't exist. Believe in God but act like there is no God. And he challenges those who believe God, but not so much in prayer. And he admits, in his own word, that he's never been good at praying. Prayer, he says, has always intimidated me. He goes on to talk about his college roommate, Todd, who loved to pray and loved to pray long prayers and would invite people over to their place and have these long prayer meetings several nights a week. And he wrote, everyone who really loved God came, and of course, while those who didn't kept their distance, I was caught in the middle. I loved God, but I despised those marathon prayer meetings. He talked about how everybody sat in a circle and prayed for hours and held hands, which drove him crazy. Some of those spiritual warriors displayed their fervor during the prayer by tightening their grip on the people they were holding hands with. Tighter, as they would say, Amen, Lord, and tighter, hallelujah, and tighter. Once, he said, when I asked a guy not to squeeze my hand so hard, he reminded me that Jesus suffered for me, so I shouldn't complain. He also confessed something that bothered him more than the squeezers, and that was the sweaters. Not the cardigans and pullovers, but the people who sweat a lot. He said, there's just something wrong about seeking God while holding a slimy hand that wants to slip out of your grip like a slippery fish. He added, so you can see why I was never that into prayer. I've always felt insecure praying out loud. I've never thought my prayers were long enough, eloquent enough, or powerful enough. While some people's prayers, like my roommate Todd's prayers, sound fluid and effortless, mine sound more like a first grader praying for a sick hamster. If prayer were a sport and we were picking teams, let's just say I'd be the last guy picked. Some struggle with praying. Some struggle with praying out loud. I am guessing that most struggle trying to understand why some of our prayers are answered and some are not. And that may bother some and intimidate others and shake the faith of more, but I'm guessing we all, to some degree or other, wonder why God does not answer the prayers of the faithful Christians who pray fervently for something that seems reasonable as a request, but it does not get answered in the way it was prayed or it was asked. You may notice that I sometimes go to songs to use in my sermons because I have grown up loving music. Most often my favorite songs and singers come from three genres of music, and they all start with the letter C: country, Christmas, and Christian. I grew up loving country music and still do, but wish they didn't always sing so much about drinking. I've always loved Christmas music and wait with anticipation every year till I can start hearing my Christmas songs again. But the songs that have shaped me most often is Christian music. And what I sing most often when I'm by myself are the songs I grew up singing in church. And if it really comes down to it, the songs that have encouraged me most and made me think and challenged me and helped me worship are the songs in our songbooks and the songs in the Psalms in this book and the songs that are sometimes still played on Christian radio in my car. Today I want to get around to one story, one artist, one album that has touched me. But let me first start with an artist and a song that you may know. This guy became popular when he released his first album the year I graduated from college, 1989. On the first album, named after himself, he had 2 smash hits. Maybe you know them: If Tomorrow Never Comes and The Dance. It was his second album, No Fences, that really took off, put him on the charts, and it stayed at the top for a long time. Some of the hits just kept coming with Friends in Low Places, Two of a Kind, Working on a Full House, The Thunder Rolls, and one called Unanswered Prayers. His name is Garth Brooks. I'll bet you knew that. And he and 2 others wrote that last one, Unanswered Prayers. It was a real-life story that happened to him. He back then, took his then wife back home to a ball game, ran into his high school sweetheart, the one he prayed passionately for, thinking she was the one that he should marry. But he was reminded while standing there, in the words of the song, some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. I love that thought, and we all agree with the sentiment. There have been some prayers that we have prayed too that were not answered as we prayed them, and now we look back and say, thank God he didn't answer it as we prayed it. He said no, and good. But I'm not going down that road today. I'm skipping past the blessings in unanswered prayers and getting to the harder unanswered prayers that we are still wondering why today are not answered. I want to turn a corner in this series on prayer and throw out a question. It's often born from the pain of heartache. It's, why didn't God answer that prayer when I needed him to do it? I think Christians need to be honest about these. We've got to be real and say it. We have been blessed by the God who answered our prayers many times and gave us what we needed and sometimes wanted. We have been blessed by the God who did not answer our prayers at times, and we discovered the blessing was there too. But also, we have been heartbroken by the same God who did not answer some of our prayers when we needed it most, and it still hurts today to talk about it. I don't know how many times we'll keep going back to the promises and speak the truth of the scriptures, like James 5:16, the prayer of the righteous one is powerful and effective. Matthew 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open to you. Psalm 34, the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous and his ears are attentive to their cry. We believe those. If we trust the Lord, if we as his people, the righteous ones, will just pray, then he will hear us and answer us. We hold on to that and we trust that. But there are times when we hold on to faith and our belief in God and prayer, but still wonder why. Why didn't he answer that when we asked him to? Why are some prayers answered and others are not? Why does God choose to say yes to them and not to them? I'm not sure I can answer this very well, but I'd like to spend the next 4 weeks giving 4 different scenarios in the scriptures where the faithful ones of God prayed fervently and did not get the answers that they were seeking. So be patient with me. We're going to walk through those in the coming weeks before we put this prayer series to bed. But today, let me just introduce the frustration of unanswered prayer by telling a story I've told before. It's really impacted me. It's a songwriter, a singer in contemporary Christian music, more popular in the past than now, but you may still hear his songs on the radio. His name is Stephen Curtis Chapman. I love him. I have some of his music. John and I saw him when he came to Springfield. But something happened to him and his family that changed them, and it has really influenced me because of the power of the story and the music he wrote afterwards. So I'll tell you the story. Stephen Curtis Chapman and his wife Mary Beth lived in Franklin, Tennessee. At the time had 6 children, the 3 youngest adopted from China. Their day that changed their world, that day came crashing down on them. It was Wednesday, May 21st, 2008, happening at their home. In his book, Between Heaven and the Real World, he describes the details of the day. I can't quote it all. I can't tell you all of it. Let me summarize it, quote him when I can. It was a sunny, warm spring day, and there was a flurry of activity with the Chapman family. The two youngest sisters, Stevie, Joy, and Maria, had graduated from preschool the week before, and they were playing in the backyard. Shoei got home from school and joined in the play in the yard with her two younger sisters, and they were all three outside, then back inside, dressing up like they were going to a Jonas Brothers concert, then darting back outside to play again at the playground. Caleb was set to graduate from high school in a few days, and a big party was being planned for the weekend. He was upstairs playing guitar. Emily just graduated from college. She was working away for a few months, anticipating her upcoming wedding in just a few months. And Will Franklin was had driven to school to audition for a play. Stephen and his wife, Mary Beth, were in the dining room working on wedding plans. Stephen was still working on a song he hoped to sing while the daughter was walking down the aisle. So Stephen gets a call. He walks outside where there's better reception on the front porch. The sisters playing in the backyard saw now 17-year-old Will returning from that trip to school, now driving slowly along the driveway toward the house in the SUV he was driving at the back of the house. And since he was always a good brother and always glad to drop what he was doing to play with his younger sisters, they were hoping he would do it on this day. So 5-year-old Maria wants his help so she could reach the monkey bars, and Chapman writes, as he rounded the corner headed toward the garage, Maria yelled out to him, "Will!" And then our rambunctious little girl started running toward the Land Cruiser. Shoei screamed at her little sister, "Maria, stop!" But she didn't. Instead, Maria kept running toward the SUV. That's when Stephen on the front porch heard the unforgettable screams coming from behind the house. Mary Beth gets there first, finds Shoei screaming. Will hit Maria with the car. Will had in the moment then picked her up off the ground, was holding her, crying desperately. Maria, wake up, and there's blood on the driveway and blood on both of them. They call 911. Mary Beth lays Maria down now to breathe for her, but she doesn't respond. Stephen arrives, starts compressions while praying, trying to figure out what just happened, not really understanding what just happened. He said nothing about any of this was making sense. It all just seemed like a very bad dream. A paramedic who lived nearby heard the 911 dispatch go out on a scanner, gets there quickly, takes over the compression so Stephen can step back, and then Stephen drops to his knees, begins to pray at the top of his lungs. God, you can't let this happen. You can't ask this of us. We can't do this. You've got to heal my little girl right now. Please, God. You can do this. I know you can. God, please. More paramedics arrive. They call for a life flight helicopter to get her quickly to the hospital. In the meantime, Will is trying to run away from what he had done. Caleb gets to him, holds him down. Others start rallying around the family, trying to help them any way they can. Stephen and Beth are driven to the hospital. Stephen just kept praying what he had been repeating over and over and over. Breathe life into Maria. Breathe life into Maria right now, God. And he just kept praying it. Breathe life into Maria. Oh, God, please. He writes, as we raced to the hospital, I made up my mind that I wouldn't leave without Maria, regardless of what the doctors told us, and I feared the worst. I was prepared to pray and beg and plead and remind God of all the times he had done this before. I wouldn't stop until Maria was breathing again. I don't care what people think, I thought. I'm going to bar the doors if I have to and keep praying until God brings our little girl back to us. I've heard all the stories. I know God can do it. He's done things like this before, so I'm going to pray until he does it. They're going to have to cuff me and drag me out of there because I'm not giving up on God or Maria. I'm not leaving until we leave this place together as a whole family. Stephen and Mary Beth and everyone else who was now getting the news and gathering there to pray were praying fervently so she would be okay, so that Maria would be okay. They waited. And then finally, one of the doctors came to Stephen and Mary Beth and said, we tried everything. We pulled out everything in our bag. We emptied the bag, and I'm so sorry. She didn't make it. Mary Beth stiffened and screamed, her tears unrestrained. No, no, she cried again and again. They went in to see her one more time, and Stephen kept praying, even for the impossible, that God would do it, bring her back to him. But at one point, Mary Beth whispered to Stephen, sweetheart, we've got to let her go. She's already gone. She's with Jesus, so it's okay to let her go. There's more to the story, and you can read it. Maybe you've heard it. I can't imagine the grief and the questioning and the blow to faith that was. But I know some in this church know something like that. Maybe not the same circumstances, but they know the pain. They've lived through the tears. They have prayed like that. Stephen would go on to write some songs through the pain after the ordeal and produced an album that came from an overwhelming grief and a tested faith. The album is called Beauty Will Rise. I own it. You can listen to it. He writes through the pain and the tragedy and hangs on to some of the truths about God. I want to tell you a few of the songs. You can listen to them all if you want sometime, but I just want to point a few out because I love the album. I love the story. And one song called I Will Trust You, he writes, I don't even want to breathe right now. All I want to do is close my eyes. I don't want to open them again till I am standing on the other side. I don't even want to be right now. I don't want to think another thought, and I don't want to feel this pain I feel, but right now pain is all I've got. It feels like it's all I've got, but I know it's not. No, I know you're all I got, and I will trust you. I will trust you. Trust you, God. I will, even when I don't understand, even then I will say again, you are my God, and I will trust you. I've prayed some hard prayers. I've been disappointed. I've been racked by grief too, like some of you, but I think my experience is still pale in comparison to some other folks in this church, because I have been amazed at watching some of you live and grieve and still hold on to faith, even though a strand of faith. I think those kind of people who have made it through with faith, even a small amount of faith, would say that's all they had. And during the deepest, darkest times, the Lord has never left them. And that's what we know, and that is what we trust, and that is how we hope. Chapman thinks about all the people going through all kinds of things like he experienced, and he describes that as walking on the dark side of God's sovereign purposes and plans. And he writes to encourage faith in others. He writes the words in this other song. He says, when you think you've hit rock bottom and the bottom gives way and you fall into a darkness no words can explain, you don't know how you'll make it out alive, Jesus will meet you there. When the doctor says, I'm sorry, we don't know what else to do, and you're looking at your family wondering how they'll make it through, whatever road this life takes you down, Jesus will meet you there. When the jury says guilty and the prison doors close, the one you love says nothing but just packs up and goes. The sunlight comes and your world's still dark. Jesus will meet you there. When you failed again and all the second chances have been used and the heavy weight of guilt and shame is crushing down on you and all you have is one last cry for help, Jesus will meet you there. He knows the way to wherever you are. He knows the way to the depth of your heart. He knows the way because he's already been where you're going. Jesus will meet you there. When you realize the dreams you've had for your child won't come true, when the phone rings in the middle of the night with tragic news, whatever valley you must walk through, Jesus will meet you there. Habakkuk took issue with God, crying out to him, believing God should do differently than he is doing. He should not do this. He could not do this. How could he do this? He prayed, how long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you don't even listen. Or cry out violence, but you do not save. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? That's in the first chapter of his book. God talks about how he will devastate his people, but the prophet, by the end of this book, will say, I will still trust him. We read it already this morning. Did you hear it? Because at the end of all of this, as it gets bad and even worse, he says, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. Rochelle says, Even when you don't see the results of your prayers around you, you may still sense God's loving presence as you grow to know Him. I've learned, he said, that any genuine communication to God may or may not change what God does, but your prayers will often change your heart or perspective. And he says, prayer reminds you that you're not in control and keeps you close to the one who is, which Stephen Curtis Chapman will address in another song as he sings, "This is not how it should be. This is not how it could be, but this is how it is, and our God is in control." And we'll sing, "Holy, holy, holy is our God." And we'll finally really understand what it means. So we'll sing, "Holy, holy, holy is our God," while we're waiting for that day. Some wonder how Christians can worship through the pain and right after the tragedy, how a Job, a believer even in the Old Testament, could, after tragedy hits and wipes everyone out, still say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away, but blessed be the name of the Lord." How could Christians do that? I would say, what else would we do? One more on Chapman's album I'll point out is hard words. "I am broken, I am bleeding, I am scared, and I'm confused, but you are faithful." Yes, you are faithful. "I am weary, unbelieving. God, please help my unbelief, because you are faithful." Yes, you are faithful. "And I will proclaim it to the world. I will declare it to my heart and sing it when the sun is shining. And I will scream it in the dark. You are faithful. You are faithful." And he keeps repeating the lines. Give me the next 4 weeks to show some faithful people in the Scriptures who prayed fervently and did not get what they had asked of God. I know I'm not answering your questions today. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just opening a can of worms and setting the stage for the frustration we share when our prayers are not answered as we have prayed. But still, could I say to you what Chapman is saying in his songs after such a great tragedy? Your prayers may not change your circumstances. Your prayers may go unanswered as you prayed them. But here are the truths I hope you know and will hold on to when that happens. No matter what it looks like, no matter how it feels, no matter what you think, rest on this and put your anchor in this truth. God is in control even when things are out of control. No matter what it looks like, God is faithful. And no matter how painful it is, no matter how your breath is taken away and you are taken to your knees, even there on your knees in the darkness and the pain, Jesus will meet you there. So I hope you will do what Chapman and others in here have done. Through the worst moments of their life, they have trusted in the God who can save them, who can heal them, who can redeem them, who can rescue them, who can bring them through that. How about you? How are you doing? How is your faith? Are you trusting in God? Are you united with Christ? Are you walking in step with the Spirit? And can we help you? Because if we could, we would love to. Let's stand and sing this song. Come if you need to.